I'm sure that a lot of you have seen this photo on the internet. This is where the Great Wall of China meets the sea. This is Shanghai Pass, China. For the layman, the first thing that comes to mind is why didn't the Mongols just swim around? Now obviously if you have the slightest idea about how wars worked, then you may understand how swimming under a massive tower manned with archers while being weighed down by your armor or weaponry may be a bad idea. But the seemingly silly question leads to a much better one. Did the Great Wall work? Let's dive into it. Since the first Great Wall was constructed in 400 BC, China was invaded, partially or completely conquered by the nomadic tribes of the north many times, with the most famous examples being the Mongols and the Manchus. When you consider that, it really does feel like the Great Wall didn't do much. Neither the Mongols nor the Manchus faced any real difficulty getting through the wall. At first glance, the Great Wall seems too great for its own good. It is incredibly long and stretched out, which would make it impossible to properly defend. A large and concentrated army would have no trouble punching a hole right through the wall. Now, of course that was true, but the Great Wall wasn't built to go head to head with large and concentrated forces. To understand how the Great Wall was supposed to function, you first need to understand the threat that it was built against. The Great Wall was built against the nomadic people of the Eurasian steppe. These warlike horse nomads were great conquerors and warriors, but the thing that they excelled at was raiding, asymmetrical warfare so to speak. They made a living by robbing the settled people. They would come in, kill the old, enslave the population, steal all that could be stolen, and leave before the local military could respond. When left unchecked, you could have 1,000 small bands of 100 raiders raiding 1,000 small towns at a time. And the nomadic raids could strip entire countries of civilization in a matter of few years. In the flatlands of northern China, they were almost impossible to combat. You could not send large armies after the raiders, as they would just run away and come again the next year. It would be a very expensive game of whack-a-mole. But you also couldn't disperse your own troops to defend every town. Then you risk the larger bands of raiders defeating your armies in detail. And that's what the Great Wall was built for. It wasn't built to stop gigantic armies of conquest. It was built to stop small bands of raiders from appearing out of thin air and wreaking havoc. See, even if it wasn't manned at all, the wall was a major obstacle. Yes, a single man could climb over it, especially in some parts. But he would need to bring his horses as well. Now consider that every nomadic warrior usually had several horses, and they would also need their flocks to keep them fed during their campaign. Now, transporting even 100 men, several hundred horses, and several thousand sheep across the wall would be a logistical nightmare. And the raiders would have to do the same thing on their way back too. Even if they could cross the wall twice, this would slow them down and allow the Chinese armies to respond in force. It was practically over for the little guy. Now, only the larger raiding forces could hope to venture into China, as only they could penetrate the defenses at the wall. Suddenly, the Chinese defenders weren't facing 100 small bands of raiders that they needed to chase all around, but only several large forces that were forced to cross at certain weak points at the wall. And this was much easier to respond in force. The Great Wall was built to separate settled civilization from the barbarians of the steppe, and it did a very good job at that. The brilliance of the Great Wall especially shines when compared to Eastern Europe. Throughout the Middle Ages, all the way until 18th century, Eastern Europe lost millions and millions of its people to the Tatar raiders. Meanwhile, aside from major wars of conquest, China seems to have fared much better. And that's not even considering that the forests and the marshes of Eastern Europe should have offered much greater protection than the grasslands of northern China against the nomads. And this comparison really puts the success of the Great Wall in perspective. All that being said, it is important to remember that a wall was just a tactical component. No wall, no fortification, no tactic could have saved China from internal fighting, political crises, and sometimes sheer stupidity. This is why it failed to stop the nomadic invasions and incursions so many times. At the end of the day, it was a Chinese commander that opened the gates to the Manchus as the Ming dynasty collapsed. The northern frontier of China required an intricate mix of diplomacy and aggressive military campaigns while using the wall as a safe rear defense line. The active policies pursued in the steppes by Tang, Han, and Qing dynasties made China the master of the steppes, which was the only real way of defending China from the barbarians of the steppe. The history of China and the Great Wall once again shows that no threat is dealt by hiding behind a wall. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, please subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.